Tim is an investigative reporter out of the Spokane area, and he's done lots of different articles, but he fell in love with the channeled scabland. So it's not the channeled scablands, it's what Brett's, I guess the father of the floods, called it as the channeled scabland. So anyway, Tim, he's written this book, Beautiful Wounds, and if he's taken all the photos that are in the book, and they're beautiful, done exquisitely. So I guess without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Tim Connor, and he's going to give us a presentation on PowerPoint about this book. And if you're interested, he's brought some copies, and you can get one signed right after the talk. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Brent. And good evening. It's an honor to be here as you were coming out from the COVID curtain. It's it's so great to see you in person. And this is my third trip here since the book has come out to set up the exhibit and do a book reading. And I've really enjoyed my time here. The staff, Zach and everybody have been really helpful and really hospitable. Brent, thank you so much for reaching out to me to be here tonight. And I hope you enjoy what I'm going to present. I think in the disclaimer department, I'm not a geologist. This book happens to be, I was going to say endowed, but that would be presumptuous. The spine of the book is geology, right? I mean, we all know these places by their names and their features. And I guess my job in coming into this landscape is to bring a more, just a more human experience to it. And it's sharpened for me in a couple ways. But as some of you who've read the book knows, it was, I wandered back into the Scablands a decade ago after being divorced and heartbroken and lost in some other ways too. And it helped me revisit something that was kind of funny from my childhood. I was born in the Scablands. I was born at Camp Hanford, Washington, 1956. But by happenstance, I grew up in Panama. My first memories are growing up in a town called Gamboa, which is in the heart of the rainforest. And so I grew up with toucans and royal blue butterflies and lush tropical terrain. And we would go, my mom's from Pasco, and we would go visit her and her folks in Pasco every 2 years, and we'd stay for a couple months. And as we would be driving out of the woods into the desert, my mom would sigh and go, God's country. And me and my 4 sisters and my brother would just go, what are you talking about? Because it just looked like, where are the trees? Where's the greenery? Where's the water? The water was certainly there in the Columbia, but that stuck in my head, God's country, because as I wandered back into this terrain in late middle life, seeking solace, I was also noticing things that I hadn't noticed before. The landscape has its own story to tell, and so do some of the humans who've walked across it. And what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to read a chapter from the book, appropriately named Brett's. I suspect all of you know who J. Harlan Brett's is. So you'll get my take on Brett's in a short chapter. I promise it'll be short. I'll try to read fast if you're losing patience with me. And then I'm going to do my slideshow. I'm going to show you a little bit of geology at first. And then I'm going to show you some of the delights of the Scablands from an aesthetic and personal standpoint. And then I've got an 8-minute video that I'm going to close with mercifully for you. It doesn't include any of my talking. What you're going to hear is wildlife and running water. And then I'll be glad to answer your questions and redirect appropriately to the geologists in the audience for the ones that I can't handle or the ones that I'll screw up if I try. So with that, I'm going to read from Beautiful Wounds. This is chapter 2. Oh, I did remember my glasses. It's a good touch when you're reading. And we'll be revisiting Brett's in the slideshow as well. So not to worry, I get a double dose of Brett's tonight. Brett's, because the terrain in Washington's mid-Columbia Basin rolls gently, if at all, roads in rural Grant County come together like strings on a tennis racket. Routes named with mere letters of the alphabet align east to west. Roads designated with numbers, some punctuated with decimal points, run north to south. This hyper-efficient collaboration of right angles breaks down 6 miles southwest of Quincy, population 6,750, where it looks as though a giant cloven foot has broken through the carefully gridded earth. This massive double amphitheater is called Potholes Coulee, or simply the Potholes. A century ago, it was both a landmark chasm and a mystery of earth science. And that's why it attracted the attention of a 27-year-old high school science teacher. His name was J. Harlan Bretz. Bretz was living and teaching in Seattle in 1909 when the U.S. Geological Survey published a detailed topographical map encompassing the western edge of what is known as the Quincy Basin. Though it seems unlikely that a map of a well-discovered place would create a stir, this one did. The tightly packed contour lines just east of the Columbia River begged for an explanation as to what event or series of events could produce such a gasping feature. For Bretz, a gifted writer and naturalist, the Potholes enigma stoked an already keen interest in Northwest geology. He formalized his scientific credentials with a PhD in 1913, and within a few years, as a University of Chicago geology professor, began leading field trips to the Northwest. By 1922, his expeditions were devoted to the rigorous exploration and documentation of Eastern Washington scablands. The Potholes Cataract was but one curiosity in a much larger puzzle. No geologist who'd visited the Eastern Washington landscape could overlook the evidence of unusual erosional landforms, many of which were spectacular in scale. What set Bretz apart is that he very publicly advanced what was, at the time, an astonishing theory, that the talus-skirted walls at Potholes and countless other coulees and dry channels of the scablands could only be explained by sudden catastrophic flooding on a mind-bending scale. On account of the field evidence pointing to a colossal water source north of Spokane, Bretz referred to his theory as a Spokane flood. He did so knowing his interpretation would challenge the prevailing thinking in early 20th century geology that even the most cavernous features are created by familiar watershed forces, shaping the landscape over long periods of time. And he was surely aware of how his argument would likely chafe scientists weary of the long-standing cultural battle with religious fundamentalists holding fast to the literal interpretation of creationism, Noah, and the biblical floods of Genesis. When I learned about Brett's remarkable career, two aspects of his story made a lasting impression on me. The first is his and his students' meticulous summer field work that involved hiking hundreds of miles through the hottest and driest stretches of Eastern Washington. The second is the abject resistance he was forced to endure for decades from some of the biggest names in American geology. To be sure, Bretz would not have become a renowned geologist had he not been vindicated. But what made him a legend is the uncompromising quality of his perseverance, the very nature of his hold on the truth, and his commitment to the process of gathering it. His science was so respected, is so respected, because he was devoted to letting the earth speak for itself. Early on, for example, Bretz took careful note of the bathtub size and larger specimens of granitic and metamorphic rock that he and others were finding in areas where there are no outcrops of these rock types. His detractors could never plausibly explain how these so-called erratics, that'd be you, the rocks, could be stranded often on hillsides, literally hundreds of miles from their source outcrops, and in areas well to the south of where Ice Age glaciers were known to have advanced. Brett surmised that the incredulously displaced boulders were deposited by inland icebergs and were thus artifacts and additional evidence of the catastrophic floods that had reshaped the landscape. His hunch would be borne out as the larger story came into view. The granitic and metamorphic boulders had been plucked from their host outcrops by ice sheets moving southward from Canada. These thick lobes of migrating ice would then block rivers, most notably the Clark Fork near the Idaho-Montana border, creating massive lakes, When the lakes burst through their ice dams, the shattered ice became a fleet of ice rafts, carrying the boulders like so much cargo and depositing them in preposterous places. In his 2015 book, Ancient Places, Jack Nisbet tells the story of the Willamette meteorite, a 15-ton chunk of iron and nickel so large that small children can crawl into its largest cavities. Exhumed a century ago, a few miles south of Portland, it is the largest meteorite ever found in the United States. What the meteorite was conspicuously missing was an impact crater. This is because the Willamette meteorite is the most exotic erratic. Scientists think it crashed on Earth in the Canadian Rockies and became encapsulated in the Purcell Trench Glacier, which pushed south to form the ice dam for Glacial Lake Missoula. Imagine the spectacle of this extraterrestrial chunk of metal trapped in a briskly moving iceberg along with more earthly erratics, passing through present-day Spokane on its way to and through Willilla Gap, then down the Columbia River Gorge. When it reached what is now Portland, the ice raft bearing the meteorite would have taken a left turn into the flooded Willamette Valley before running aground. Tellingly, several smaller granitic erratics were eventually discovered within a few feet of where the meteorite was found in 1902. The phenomenon of the ice rafted erratics, many larger than pickup trucks and some the size of small houses, vividly testifies the immense power and breadth of the Scabland floods. You find a gleaming white boulder on a hillside like the erratic littered north slope of Rattlesnake Mountain near Richland. There you can easily visualize how deep the water must have been at the time the ice raft melted and deposited the wayward rock. But the erratics were only part of the evidence that Brett set before the nation's geological community, beginning in 1919. His core arguments flowed from widely gathered observations about the nature, shape, and breadth of landforms that defied conventional explanations. To Brett's trained eyes, it mattered a great deal that the eroded pathways in the Scablands were broad channels, not V-shaped valleys, and that the channels were extensively braided, joining and separating across hundreds of miles. The primary Scabland arteries had been filled not just to the brim, but it overflowed to create secondary channels, some of which were enormous. The more field work he completed, the more confident he became in his conclusion that only an epic flood could account for his and his students' observations. Today, the Spokane flood is known to geologists as the Brett's floods. It's a concise homage to Brett's and takes the plural form on account of the evidence that there were at least dozens of the cataclysmic outbursts as the Purcell and Okanagan lobes of the Cordilleran ice sheet advanced southward during the later stages of the most recent ice age. Every writer who takes to the subject confronts the limitations of language because even adjectives like cataclysmic are inadequate. The forensics of the geologic research broaden our understanding, yet the science is no substitute for the engaged imagination needed to visualize the power and breadth of what happened. There's nothing else like it in the observed history of the planet. Earth scientists quite literally have to look to Mars to find similar features on the scale of those created in the channeled Scablands. Brett's legend didn't require an inconceivable theory, nor did it require a cinematic confrontation, although there is one packed into it. After years of field work and several journal articles advancing his great flood theory, Brett's was invited to the Cosmos Club in the nation's capital in January of 1927 to present his evidence at a meeting of the Geological Society of Washington. Notwithstanding the honor of the invitation, what unfolded, in the words of Brett's biographer, John Sonnickson, was, quote, a planned attack, close quotes, subjecting Brett's to, quote, the collective bile of virtually every prominent geologist of his time. It would take decades to repair what, in retrospect, was a shameful debacle. Brett's wasn't Galileo. He hadn't offended the church by appending the heavens, and he wasn't imprisoned by clerics. Rather, he was rebuked by other scientists for what turned out to be first-rate science. In a sense, he'd threatened their gospels. And while they couldn't lock him up or shut him up, they could impugn his reputation. In the aftermath of the clash at the Cosmos Club, Brett's life story took on a different trajectory. It would end well, but not without a bitter lesson about what a search for truth can inflict upon a searcher. It's a story folded into the scars of a landscape that, metaphorically at least, will always bear the imprints of his well-worn hiking boots. That's Brett's. Okay. It's still with me? Good. Okay, I'm going to show you some slides. And I actually, one of the reasons I'm single is because it's sometimes hard to get in and out of my apartment because of all the rocks. And I've done readings, with kids where I brought lots of rocks, and I decided not to do that tonight because I lose my train of thought too easily once I start talking about rock. But I did bring a couple, which I'll get to in a minute. I've got to grab a clicker. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I'm starting you with a fish, not a rock, a fish. And I'm doing so because this is one of my swimming companions. It's a red band trout. It's the signature fish of the Spokane River, the rehabilitated Spokane River, which I'm able to swim in almost every day during the summer. And you probably wouldn't make this connection to the flood story. But these are Ice Age flood cobbles, taken not far from where I took the picture of the fish. They're beautiful. What you'll not see in that picture is a lot of what is bedrock in Spokane, which is basalt. These are argillites and quartzites and granite cobbles that the Lake Missoula floods dumped into the Spokane area. And their connection to the fish is that they fill up a dramatic reservoir called the Spokane-Rathdrum Valley Aquifer that stretches all the way back to Lake Pend Oreille, near to where the ice dam was that collapsed. And what you have is a deep trench, nearly a coulee, that's filled up with these Ice Age cobbles. And that's what feeds the Spokane River. It's beautiful, clear, cold water that the trout and I get to swim in the summer. So it's a way of illustrating what my sensibilities as a human being, and I'm not alone in this. I was having a wonderful conversation with Ken about an aesthetic feature of the scabland that we both notice. We even know the locust tree near the site, and it touches back to these are Brett's Hills, which I'll talk about later, but the aesthetics of it and the way Brett's had described it, it touches us. It fulfills us as wanderers in this landscape when we can detect not just the geology and the science behind the terrain, but also its aesthetic beauty. Let's see, let's get to that. Now, this is where I might lose my train of thought, because you're probably wondering what this omelet is doing on the screen. This is a slide from a recent webinar conducted by a community college professor in Spokane, Andy Buddington, who's interested in looking at the deep past. And by deep past, I mean going all the way back over 1 billion years to the ancient supercontinent Columbia. And the recent evidence that at that time, our part of the world, Eastern Washington, which is basically surrounding, I'm going to get up here and just point at this, the Belt-Purcell Basin. Okay, well, what's that got to do? Well, those are where the rocks below the fish come from, the Belt Basin, which began to form about 1.5 billion years ago, collecting sediments from Laurentian mountains and also from, it turns out, from mountains in Australia and Antarctica. And using techniques like zircon analysis, we can confirm that. We can actually get a fix on where these rocks, where these particles of rocks that filled up that sedimentary basin came from. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I find this really mind-blowing. And so what happens to the Belt Basin, this is almost 1.5 billion years ago. That continent splits apart and it reforms the world reforms into supercontinents at least 2 more times since then. Once in Rodinia, and then Pangaea, and then later to what we have now. But this is from Miller and Rowan's Roadside Geology of Washington, 2017, I think. And this is showing the rifting of Rodinia. And you can see the belt basin, which fills up Idaho, Montana, creeps into Spokane, and probably as far as Creston Butte to the west. This is it rifting apart 750 to 700 million years ago. And that is what got exhumed during the great floods, the Lake Missoula floods. So one of the authors of the paper with who did the zircon analysis, identifying the mountain outcrops in Australia and Antarctica that fed the belt basin, is Steve Box. And Steve and I went hiking, about a month ago. That's my book on a piece of rock. That rock is called Hauser Lake Gneiss. It's one of the oldest metamorphic rocks in the region. And it's just a beautiful gneiss. And we were walking, there's a part of the Priest River complex, which has some ancient rocks in it, incorporates Mount Spokane, but also creeps down south of I-90 in an area near Liberty Lake, Washington, if you're familiar with that. And so we're walking up on a ridge above Liberty Lake, and we both see this rock at about the same time. It's bigger than a skateboard. And we both recognize it as a big slab. It's, by the way, it's when you want to know for sure what you're looking at, it's not bad to be walking alongside a senior US geologist who can confirm you're fine. And we were joking about a friend. We have a common friend who actually gifts us rocks, these huge rocks that he finds in rivers and other places. And he gifts them to us, which is very kind of him. And here's this rock. And I looked at Steve and I said, we've got to take this home. So Steve and I carried this 2 miles down the mountain so I could bring it home. It's a joke on my cousin who kept bugging me for years of when my coffee table book was going to be published. So I had to send this to her. That's Hauser Lake Gneiss, beautiful piece of rock. See, I got to point this way. This is one of my favorite photos. Requires a little explanation. The colorful rock in the middle is a big chunk of argillite, which had to come into Spokane on the Lake Missoula floods. We've got pictures in Spokane of mining operations in the Spokane Valley where these huge rocks are there amongst the cobbles. And this beautiful piece of argillite is sitting right on top. It's in a crib of Grand Ronde basalt that's 16 million years old. And I came across this while I was swimming in the river near a feature called the Devil's Toenail. That's a longer caption that I would ever write for the book. So it's not in the book, or is it? I forget whether it is or not, but it's just, when I recognized what was going on there with this beautiful ancient rock on top of this relatively young piece of Grand Ronde basalt, I just had to take its picture. This is from Marley Miller, one of the co-authors of Roadside Geology of Washington. What I wanted to just show here briefly is the cross-section, the basic cross-section of the Pacific Northwest with its terrains. So basically where Steve and I picked up that piece of Hauser Lake Gneiss is over here. The PC Belt rocks are in that area, obviously, because the Hauser Lake Gneiss comes from, is actually a metamorphosed piece of the Pritchard Formation, which is the lowest part of the belt basin. And I just wanted to show this to you. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it basically, especially for those of us who grew up in Eastern Washington, it's a way of telling our friends in Husky land that the rest of the state is just kind of visiting. So. And this is one of my favorite rocks. My son went to Western Washington University, and so when I would go get him and visit him, bring him home, we would go right through Wenatchee and cross the river up towards Orondo. And when you do that, you cross what is called the Swakane Biotite Gneiss, which is a beautiful rock, and it fills Corbelet Canyon as you go up grade on Highway 2 up to the Waterville Plateau. It's turns out to be, and Steve went over this with me, the Swakane comes from some of the deepest parts of the North Cascade Core Complex. Okay, so technically that's interesting, but you just have to visualize this deep rock appearing as a result of erosion. One of the things I like about it is when we're on top of the basalt in Eastern Washington, God knows there's a lot of, especially if you're from Pasco like me, where it goes down like, 2 or 3 miles. It's hard to imagine what's beneath it. When you go through the Swakane Gneiss, you get to see this beautiful rock and appreciate what's beneath all that basalt and get to understand the story of where it came from. It's just I probably tested Devin's patience that day because we hung around and took pictures and gathered rocks, some of which are on the floor of my bathroom now. Let's see. So I'm going to back up just a little bit. So this is a place that resonates with me. This is Wallula Gap, which is east of Pasco. And I learned about Wallula Gap because my grandpa Gil took me through there when I was 9 years old. We were on our way fishing. We go fishing on the Tucannon River. And I was just in awe of this place from the day I walked into it with him, both in what it looked like and the sound, as I describe it in the book, the trains from across the way. By the time their horns reached us across the water, they sounded like French horns, just a beautifully resonant place. I wanted to show you this. I kind of cobbled this together from a DNR map because it shows, I wanted to show you both the extent of the Rosa member of the Wanapum basalt. So the Rosa is going to be in the darker green. The mustard green around it is the rest of the Wanapum, and then the brownish behind it is the extent of the Grand Ronde. So what's really interesting about, well, there's several things interesting about the Rosa, but one of them is that it comes from a vent line that extends up across I-90. If you go to Spokane, you'll go by, gosh, I think it used to be a Stuckey's when I was a kid. Now it's a marijuana shop, but it's hey, tale of the times, isn't it? So and it's right there off the freeway. Well, you have to imagine that the Rosa vent line passed right by there, right by that weed shop. Sorry, not that there's anything wrong with that. And so it extends further south, and one of the places it extends to is the Esker Ranch site, which has a lot going for it, including, I learned from Brent, some huge brown trout that frequent Rock Creek in that area. But it's also on the vent line. And you can actually go there and within a short walk from the parking lot, find volcanic spatter from those vents. Now, these are the same kind of vents that 3 years ago were throwing up those curtains of fire on the Big Island in Hawaii. So you have to imagine going back, 15 million years ago, that's what was happening in our part of the world, is that this huge vent line throwing up these curtains of fire. So the two rocks I brought today are just, I'm going to hold them up. This is a piece of regular basalt. It's actually palagonite I collected from Deep Creek. So where basalt meets the water, it turns a nice shiny golden brown at times. It's pretty heavy. This thing is not. This is spatter from that vent that I picked up. This one's in a bag next to my desk. when it's not here. And if I'm not careful, it will leave a small pile of cinnamon there, but it's just in terms of informing your imagination. That's what's, sorry, pointing this in the wrong direction. This is the spatter pile that I grabbed that specimen from. Some of the spatter is red, some of it is blue, and there's actually red piles and blue piles. It's like something out of Sesame Street if you're a young geologist. So what happens? Well, the lava from that vet heads west. And this is where part of it winds up. This is the feathers in Frenchman Coulee, which I visited earlier today, just to make sure people from Seattle continue to climb on the rocks. And they were there, and I took their pictures. But it's actually well photographed in winter too. Not that I mind climbers in my picture, but it's nice to have one without. I also learned in talking to Randy Lewis, the great storyteller of the Wenatchee tribe, that this is where his family lived 3 generations ago, in the Bowl of the Feathers. I didn't know that when I took this picture. But there you are. These, there are still people that have not seen the feathers. My first impression when I visited is it just reminded me so much of Stonehenge. But of course, it was created by nature. This is the last stand of rows of basalt columns that were attacked by the Lake Missoula floodwaters that created Frenchman Coulee. Beautiful formation. Fun to photograph. Okay. Getting that sinking feeling that we're going to be here all night. I'm sorry. I might just do the lightning round like they get through this. This is just a map tree to, this is really not what I need to show the erratics, but it's part of my standard show just to show where everything is in terms of the Great Flood. So those of you at home who have people in the room that are not part of the erratics, what we're looking at are the main features of the Columbia Basin back during the Great Flood days. On the right side is Glacial Lake Missoula, which was created by the Clark Fork Ice Dam, which is the Purcell Trench Lobe. We've got Grand Coulee to the left. I put a little gap down here to the right so you can see one of my favorite places at the bottom. And then, you know, the floods went through that. A lot of people don't realize that the waterfalls in the Columbia Gorge are great flood features. I mean, the floods had the force all through the gorge to cut off those hills and create those beautiful waterfalls. And this is from, this is Green Monarch Ridge in the background, where it looks, where you see that snow face right in the middle. That is part of where the Purcell Trench Glacier met the Wallace Formation and other rocks of the Belt Basin that helped, that basically, I mean, the dam was much bigger. The dam would have eventually filled this whole photograph, but that's where you can, I've been up in the ridge, you can actually see the rocks where the glacier docked against. It's not that hard to get to. Well, Brett's. Yeah, so I want to talk just, I know I read from Brett, so I'm going to be short here. It's J. Harlan Brett's, I think that's Mount Rushmore in the background. So he did have a sense of humor. And this is, I want to show you this. This is that 1910 USGS map that so intrigued him, where he's looking at that and basically, I'm embellishing maybe a little bit, asking people, well, what's your idea? How did that get there? And he wasn't satisfied that anybody was answering it. This is a photograph that I took for the book. And this is from the, the lens on my camera, I don't have a fisheye lens. I cannot get the full breadth of, somebody having trouble hearing me? Okay, sorry. In one shot. This is just the North Alcove, the ancient lakes, the so-called ancient lakes, which as the geologist knows, are not that ancient at all. But it's just a dramatic photo of the scale of this incredible feature. I'm sorry it's cut off near the top. I imagine I can see the curvature of the earth back there. Of course, I'm actually, the photographer that took this picture was looking toward Wenatchee when he took it. So. This is the beautiful, the remarkable Brett's map that appeared in late 1923. I'm doing events in Spokane, obviously, around the book this year, which is important. I mean, we're 100 years from Brett's visit to Spokane, where he brought his grad students and went out and started putting together this remarkable map. If you buy my book, there's versions of the map on both the inside and back cover, which I purchased from the University of Chicago. I know this is not the Scablands. My point of showing you this beautiful picture of the Palouse, which is not far from a beautiful Scabland feature called Hole in the Ground, is that this is what Eastern Washington would look like without the Great Floods, which is wonderful if you like wheat and you like the Palouse, but it wouldn't have much water because the Palouse soils do a magnificent job of soaking up water, which is why it's such a great, like the world's leading place for dryland wheat. So really, when I contemplate this natural tragedy or this natural calamity, the benefit of it is we get cobbles for the fish, we get wetlands for the ducks, we get a lot of things that wouldn't be there without these catastrophic floods. This is the cover of a USGS report on the Spokane Aquifer. A lot of people in Spokane ask me, how do I get to the Scablands? And my tart response is, well, look out your window because you're in it. And a lot of people in Spokane don't realize that they're in a primary flood feature because we've got these big beautiful pine trees all over the place. But if you can still easily get lost in the South Hill because the roads are, having to weave around basalt outcrops that were, exposed by the Lake Missoula floods. Okay, here we go. This is the picture of the Willamette meteorite with the kids in the cavities. I just wanted to, this is the most exotic erratics. And I thought you as the erratics would appreciate this photo. This is, it's evening would be too long if I told that story, but if you can buy Jack's books too, Jack Nisbet's book, Ancient Places, you'll read the whole story. It's just fantastic. And Jack is a great storyteller. And he also has a nice blurb on the back of my book. So thank you, Jack. This is not far from where I took a picture of the argillite in the cradle, the basalt cradle. This is the Devil's Toenail. And it just, again, testifies to the power of the Lake Missoula floods coming through and carving the ground round basalt that the river runs through. Now, this is a granitic boulder in my swimming pool. It's a piece called photo called Tailwind. This is what I think of as the mezzanine level above the bowling pitcher. So I'm already up 200 feet when I'm photographing these large. You have to imagine that when, as Brent and other geologists have taught me, there were periods of time where the Spokane area was already underwater when Lake Missoula broke because of the glacial Lake Columbia and glacial Lake Spokane. But in any event, the water would rise so high that it would go up over the rest of the rim rock up another 150 feet or so with such force that it would, of course, we've got erratics up there, but it also created ripples on the ground near where Fairchild Air Force Base is now. So it's just to stand there. I like the photo aesthetically, but what I'm really after there is trying to share with you the experience of just standing in a place where you get to feel the power of this incredible natural event. And this is how fresh it is. I mean, we're downstream from that. Now we're about 10 miles from the floodwaters that would have overflowed that rim. This is basalt in a camas field. I think it's on BLM land there, the Miller Ranch property. Yeah. This is another photograph of it. And what I brought into the story here behind, in the background, is a Brett's Hill. These are the surviving Palouse Hills, if you will, that were profoundly reshaped by the great floods. There's something poetic for me that they generally, this is not universally true because the waters did swirl. But as Brett's noted, they all headed for the Pasco Basin. So it's the higher slopes, the faces of the hills tend to point towards Spokane, the tails tend to point toward Pasco. I just threw this in because I like the way the scablands look in winter too, with a bunch of trees on it. So this is scabland terrain south of the Turnbull National Wildlife Refuge. Okay. Boop. And there's a chapter in the book called The Canyon Thief, written by a kid from Pasco, that would be me, who was a little bit glum that because of the Lake Missoula floods, the Palouse River got rerouted. It used to actually run down to Pasco and enter the Columbia down there, but the power of the floods carved a new, carved a shortcut to the Snake River. There's some rich stories around Palouse Falls and the Brett's puzzle. I mean, Brett's was, of course, of the position that the Palouse River could not possibly have made a gorge of that size. And his doubters didn't accept that until one of the stories, one of his critics came around the corner in a bus and saw it for the first time and just shouted, "Oh my God, how could I have been so wrong?" I don't know if that's exactly true, but if Brett's was not on the bus, but if he was, I'm sure he would have enjoyed that. This is a photo from the Drumheller Channels. I should call this photo where Nick Zentner lost his hammer. Some of you have seen that video where Nick and I think he's still wearing the bow tie. His rock hammer goes down through the, I told him I'll keep looking for it. But I love this photo because you're looking right at the angle of where the direction where the floods are coming from. And this is the basalt columns on this come from one of the smaller and later flows called the Elephant Mountain flows. And they, for whatever reason, they leave these, I mean, when you're coming into the terrain from the other direction, and yeah, I have walked all the way across this. What you see from afar is, well, it looks like a box of pencils. It's just these beautiful columnar palisades. When National Geographic did its most recent story on the scablands, they used an Elephant Mountain palisade, not this one, but one pretty close by, as its cover photo for that story. This is the falls below Judith Pool, where the water course reaches the middle stage of the alcove on its way down to the ancient lakes. Just a nice water photo. This, of course, is the maw of Upper Grand Coulee, just to capture the scale of it. That Steamboat Rock, if you follow the highway, the asphalt straight back, that's Steamboat Rock in the distance. This is one of my favorites from Moses Coulee. This is the ramparts where Douglas Creek comes down towards the town of Palisades. Just, yeah, I love photographing rock formations. It's one of my favorites. These are some of my favorite wildflowers. On the left is the native iris, the Rocky Mountain iris. The mercurial and beautiful green-banded Mariposa lily is in the middle. And I have a fondness for wild geranium, the sticky geranium on the right. I think my favorites, if the other flowers will put their fingers in their ears, is the Mariposa lily, just because it tends to bloom late. It's just, and it's, to me, it's very sporadic. There's no, it's not like there's, to me, known, it's not like a camas bog. It's a flower that appears as summer is just getting really crispy and hot, and they're just gorgeous blossoms. Remind me of orchids. And this is what's spring can look like in the scablands. This is actually taken near Sprague Lake. And it is a beautiful bouquet of yarrow and blanket flower and wild geranium, among other things. This is some people call these mule's ears. I call them Carey's balsam root. They tend to arrive a couple weeks to a month after arrowleaf balsam root has bloomed, has an oilier leaf. The pink flower is Douglas's onion. There's a camas blossom in there. I'm always, my heart is upbeat every time I see arrowleaf balsam root blooming for the first time. It's just such a great harbinger of spring, and then it's gone. But if you know where the Carey's is, you can actually extend your balsam root addiction for a couple of weeks more. It tends to be more resilient too, so it grows longer. But that's all I have to say about balsam root. This is obviously camas in the foreground, and that's Brett's Hill in the background. And you've got your scabland basalt beneath it, so kind of a 3-in-1 picture there. Bitterroot, oh man. It's such a moving experience when you're as bummed out as I was 10 years ago to be walking across ground that somebody looks to have taken a blowtorch to and see these beautiful flowers growing out of seemingly just right out of the rock. It's just beautiful. And those are taken actually at the top of the Rim Rock in Spokane. I want to show you this because this is North America's smallest bird. It's the calliope hummingbird, which is a denizen of the scablands. Whether you notice it or not, it's not much bigger than a cicada. But part of what I do is pick out creatures that I like and figure out ways to photograph them. And that's what I did here. And so at the other end of the scale is this guy who I nearly hit on my bike about a month ago. Too late to make the book. But yeah, a bull moose. I've had, this year I've had like 3 bull moose encounters, and that'll get you going. This is a lady moose munching on red twig dogwood at the Turnbull National Wildlife Refuge. I was with my son Devin. I got out of the car and made sure he did not. You know, just got to be careful with moose. And Devin and I have also swum in this creek with river otters, but not under these conditions, and not with a river otter that you can tell the way he's looking at me that he was not inviting me to swim with him that day. So you know, cute and cuddly otters, but he actually barked at me. It's totally, totally territorial, but photogenic. Okay. Yeah. Listen, this was in. My mom passed away 2.5 weeks or so before I finished the manuscript, and I was one of her caregivers and her bather, and I would to get this photo required me to get up at 3 a.m. and run out to the Drumheller and get a shot of the sunrise and race back so I could be back in Spokane at 8 o'clock to pick up my shift. But as I'm setting up to get the sunrise, I'm looking here. And I'm setting up the camera, and I just feel like I'm being watched. And I turn around, and you know, it's the thing about mule deer, and you probably all know that they're a matriarchal society. So if you want to get along with the herd, you've got to deal with the matriarch. And I've been able to do that a few times, not every time, because mule deer, you know, get shot at a lot, and not just with people with cameras. So they're very alert and aware, but it's pretty cool to be able to at least when they're confident enough to be able to get close to them. And part of it is they have just an endearing sense of curiosity. They really were wondering what the heck I was doing. This is photo taken since the book. This is about a month ago. So I was coming down a hill on my bike. I try to be carbon friendly when I go out. If I can get to someplace on a bike, I'll go. And I was on my bike coming down this hill. I didn't see him at first. I saw his mom over bank grazing. And I just threw my bike down and started talking to Mom. He was watching me. Once he saw that his mom was okay with me being there, and throwing off my bright yellow helmet, just trying to, he came up to me. This is the second time I've had young mule deer bucks just come up to me and almost within touching distance, just out of curiosity, but it's after they get a signal from their mom that it's okay. So that's why you want to be nice to mule deer moms if you're a photographer. I haven't tried the same technique with badgers, but no, really, I got this one because I did have a draft of my book and I started reading it to him and he just, that's how I arrested him. Just really. But this is out on one of the rails that trails viaducts by Lamont, one of my favorite places to visit. And this is a coyote, a very healthy looking coyote in the Scablands near Spokane from this year. Let's see. This is one of my favorite birds. This is a very difficult to photograph bird. It's called an American kestrel. It's a falcon. And, all animals have sensitivity, whether they're red band trout or raptors, and sharp eye, they know when you're there. I was able to get this picture because he was more, it is a he. I'm forgetting Bruce's last name, McCarran, I think it was, who was here last time, a birder with North Central Audubon. And he came up to me after I did this. He says, "It's a male." Because I said, "I can't tell them apart." He says, "Yeah, that's a male." So, because they have bluer wings, I'm told, than females. But at any rate, they're both very hard to photograph. So, obviously, this is a signature of the Scablands, the red-tailed hawk. Again, took this photo not far from Lamont as well. This is a Cooper's harp. Sorry we lost his eye up there, but beautiful breast. And he was hunting songbirds in winter. These guys are, well, I'm sure you've seen these on your tours from time to time. These are American white pelicans. I think next to the California condor, the biggest birds of North America, eat a huge amount of fish. I had just arrived, I was not long from arriving here from Panama. We have pelicans in Panama, but nothing like this. We have the small gray ones. And I saw these on the Columbia River and thought I was spacing out. I couldn't believe that there would be pelicans on the Columbia River, but of course that's down in that area, they're very common. These are on a Clear Lake near Spokane, photographed last year. Oops, let's see what's next here. These are two of my favorites. We all get to spend time, even if we live in town, with red-winged blackbirds. They're beautiful birds. I'm going to play you some sound later in the video of the yellow-headed blackbird. And if I'm doing nothing to make your evening, that bird will handle that because it's got an incredible call. So western bluebird in a burn area near Spokane. I think this is a towhee, yes. A spotted towhee. Whoops. Let me get a tennis elbow here with this thing. Oh, sorry, this is a black-headed grosbeak, and this is a western kingbird, which you can't help but experience if you go out in the Scablands. You're going to spend time with eastern and western kingbirds, and they're a lot of fun to photograph. This thing, just because I love calliope hummingbirds, this is another photograph of North America's smallest bird with its regalia on its throat exposed. This is the sacred bird of the Wanamum tribe. This is a Bullock's oriole. I had to live in the Northwest quite a while before I saw my first oriole. And it's a day I'll never forget. They're just a spectacular bird. Like many birds and waterfowl, the females are much more approachable than the males. The male bullocks just want to spend all their time at the top of pine trees, at least when I'm around. So I actually had to climb up my swimming hole in Spokane. Not only has cobbles in the riverbed, it has huge mounds that go up 100 feet of flood cobbles. So I had to climb up to the top of the mountain and shoot down on the tree that this Bullock's oriole was in order to get its picture. This is one of my favorites. Last winter, I befriended a heron to the point one day she was actually waiting for me on the trail. But she let me sit with her for about 20 minutes. Obviously, I was wearing more than a t-shirt. It was a pretty cold day, but this photo is called Showtime. That's one of the better photos from that day. Yeah, these are beautiful scabland winter ducks this is the male hooded merganser. Some of the fancier diving ducks we get actually are more present in the winter than they are during the rest of the year. And this is another set. So these are male golden eyes swimming in Latah Creek, just down the way from where I lived. Boy, I just hope I'm not setting off doorbells in Zoom land with this. It's just for equal time. These are the female golden eyes. I love this picture because the golden eye on the right is kind of the look I get at parties from women. So it's nice to know I get them from ducks. I'm joking. There are several beautiful gregarious women in my life. Don't get me wrong. This is the gray catbird. And I wish I could tell you catbird stories tonight, but I want you to get home at a decent hour. But this is one of my favorite. They are incredible with their voices. I mean, they have a basic call, but they also have the ability to impersonate almost anything. I mean, sometimes I think I'm hearing warblers when I'm just hearing catbirds call. Okay, I'm gonna just, if I can borrow a minute from your time with your friends, children, grandchildren. I have a friend, Lindell Hagen, who's one of the state tops birder. And last year, she and I were arguing over what a catbird is saying. And I was convinced that I was hearing the catbird say this: Eric, 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 Eric. And I said, Lindell, that's what I'm hearing. She says, well, that's not what they sound like. This is what they sound like. And I said, it's just like, maybe I should be working for the January 6th committee. I said, Lindell, I've got the tapes. I had recorded it. So she's like, Lindell is like not only a great birder, but like the sweetest person I know. And I sent her the tape. She said, okay, Tim, your catbird is saying Eric. So there, thank you. Thank you for indulging that story. Okay. Oh yeah, well, need I say more? The Western Meadowlark, I mean, boy, that'll get you out of your winter funk when you hear that the first time in the spring, won't it? Not that you have winter funks, but I do. So, this is obviously a northern flicker. Yeah, talk about a bird that's hard to get to know, except when you don't want them to be like hammering on your chimney. Yeah. These are, I'm trying to, yeah, so the tundra swans, you can tell them apart from the the other swans because they have these yellow lores underneath their eyes. So the one in the middle, it's just how you tell tundra swans apart from trumpeter swans. And this is a quintet of them during their, I think this is their spring migration. I forget. But beautiful. I mean, that's one of the, again, you know, we wouldn't have tundra swans or trumpeter swans on our lakes because without the great floods, without the scablands, we wouldn't have these lakes. Yeah, so this is heart of Dry Coulee. That's the same as this photo. Excuse me, folks at home on Zoom, but I've got still pictures around the room. If you'd like to talk to me about purchasing one, you can. So that's my brief sales pitch on the photos. But this is one of my favorites. Brent and I were trading stories about how you visit this place and some of the human obstacles involved, but I won't go into that. Okay. We still on Dry Coulee? Okay, this is these are black locust trees from an abandoned farmstead out in the Scabs beyond Lamont. And I just, you know, a lot of this book is about the, you know, being alone for therapeutic reasons, right? Just, I mean, I'd reached a point in my life where while I was happy to be with other people, I really need to get to know myself better and subject myself to just being alone. So I'm out there in Lamont with my camera, and if I had a cell phone, it wouldn't have worked. But it just, it's hard to describe the solace that these places give me. And I apologize to everyone who's called me up or emailed me and said, can I go with you? And I've had to, I don't make excuses. I just say variations of the word. If it's not no, it's not now. But it's so that I can, you know, I'm still learning how to be a photographer, but I'm still learning how to be alone. And this is a good place to try that out. I think, so this is my mom and her dad, Gil. Gil was the one who introduced me to Willow Gap, and both of them introduced me to a world of incredible love and incredible care. And in many ways, my book is dedicated to my daughter, Audrey, who is 28 and is one of these people who has had to fight for her life and her brain and her being almost every day of her life. And I'm so proud of her. And she's also my best friend. She'll want to know within an hour how it went tonight. But my mom and my grandpa gave me the heart I needed to do my work as an investigative reporter. And one of those assignments, unfortunately, was to report on the secret radioactive emissions from Hanford. I was the reporter that broke that story. But I had to go there alone. And I was often there for weeks, being the only person walking around Hanford without a badge. But damn it, I was born there. You know, it wasn't like, and, but it was hard. And knowing what Gil, part of what Hanford, I was going to say unwittingly, but part of the Hanford dawned in the heart of the days of World War II, where manpower was short. And so a lot of people that came to Hanford were recruited from all over, including the South. So in came Jim Crow, and in came bans where people of color could not live in Richland and Kennewick. They were prohibited. They could live in housing near the plant, but they couldn't live in residential housing, and there was a curfew. And so they all came to West Pasco, and that's where my family's from. And Gil, to his credit, was one of the people that insisted that the community pool be fully integrated. And I'm really proud for him. I mean, he was an insurance salesman. He really stuck his neck out. I think of him, I think of his grace, his sense of humor, his love of life, and that beautiful daughter of his who became my mother, whom I got to care for, and whom I grew closer to even as she was going away. So I'm going to leave you there. That's I'm a work in progress, and it's great to be able to share this story with those of you who really understand the importance of this terrain and what it has to offer our human sensibilities when we get to go out and visit it. So now I'm going to show you that video I promised, where I'm going to shut up and let and just let the silence and the bird song do the work for me.